All right, good morning, everyone. I have just finished watching the latest episode of Fear the Walking Dead, so I'm going to do the analysis for it. And I will say that I did like this episode a lot better than the last one, mostly because there was a lot more for us to talk about. A lot more symbolism, a lot more interesting dialogue, and some sequences that were clearly a callback to Coda. So that's always fun. I really enjoyed watching the episode, even if it was quite tragic in terms of the plot. So there are going to be major spoilers here for this episode. Make sure that you've watched before you keep listening, okay? So let's jump right in. The opening shot is a walker that has a lot of carbuncles and a starfish on its face. Now, of course, they're near the ocean, so this is a natural thing to see, but at the same time, any kind of ocean or ocean life symbolism, and certainly a star, is things that we've always associated with Beth. So, return star, cosmology, the Sirius star, all of that. So that first shot really jumped out at me for that reason. Then we see Daniel, Strand, Madison, and a few others get out of a boat. They are here because they believe that Padre used to get gasoline from this particular place, and they're looking for gasoline because they're short on it. Now, we've seen gasoline as a symbol for a long time. We definitely saw it in season 4, maybe even before then, but definitely since Beth came front and center, gasoline and gas stations in general have been a big deal. In 4A, we saw Daryl and the others going to a gas station when they were on the way to the veterinary college looking for medicine for the virus that was at the prison. I think gasoline represents the ability to travel, to go places and find things, but of course we've also seen it used as an accelerant, setting things on fire. I mean, it has a lot of different meanings and such. So they go in to the gas station, and we definitely see some interesting symbols in the background. Now, like I said, I'm not the best at picking up background symbols, but I was specifically looking here because it was a gas station and because I knew that the symbolism was there. So the shot that really captured my attention is this one, and it's because they focused on it for several seconds. It's like it wanted us to look at this. Now, on the right, this is obviously a cigarette promo, telling what cigarettes are for sale. On the right side of it, it's blue, and there's a pig, and we have seen that symbol a lot around Beth. On the left, there is an eagle. There's some red, there's also some orange, but remember that there is an eagle in still in the Moonshine Shack. So those are both symbols that we've definitely seen around her before. And then also notice that the clock says 2:15. I'm not saying the time itself is important. It doesn't jump out at me in a huge way, but it's like they wanted us to notice the clock along with these symbols. Another thing that kills me after that is that they notice a box that says, take what you need and leave the rest. Now, for anyone who hasn't watched Fear over the last few seasons, this was actually a callback to a storyline a few seasons ago when the group was doing this. They were basically setting up way stations with supplies, and they would leave these signs that said, take what you need, leave the rest. And so it was a way of trying to help people who are traveling who might be in need of food or something like that. And it was just a big storyline, one of the seasons. So we're seeing that again. And then Daniel says something interesting. He looks down at it and says, this is so weird. I mean, to them it feels really surreal because this is something they did once, some years ago, and they don't understand why they're seeing something here that's kind of a replay of that. But Daniel says, who would want to resurrect that? So he uses the word resurrect, and that's in conjunction with these other symbols like the pig and the eagle and the coloring. So this is super interesting. And the gas station, right? After that, they kind of get, so Madison looks out the window and sees a walker that only has one arm. And we're going to talk about the one arm symbol here in a minute too. But she's worried that it might be Alicia. It's actually not. And they establish that. But then the walkers break through the window and come into the gas station. So this, to me, was an obvious callback of Coda. Not necessarily specifically to do with Beth, but when Father Gabriel goes to the school and the walkers break through the glass. It actually looked a lot like that. And, they come in and they all start trying to kill the walkers, and then somebody kills them from the outside, and Luciana walks in. So again, if you haven't watched Fear, these are all characters that have been on the show for a long time and who at one point were together in the same group, and they haven't seen each other in a lot of years because at the beginning of season 8, they did a time jump of like 7 years. And again, that's probably in order to bring the narrative of Fear current with the flagship show and where everything ended there, because ever since Morgan went to Fear and then they did the time jump with Rick, Fear has been a handful of years behind the main show's narrative. So anyway, we're getting caught up in where all these characters have been for the last few years, and they honestly haven't seen each other in a long time. So this was a big reunion episode too, which was a big deal. So they see Luciana, she is there, and we have some interesting dialogue. Once again, Luciana says to Madison, because this is the first time she's finding out that Madison is actually alive, and she says, "You died a long time ago." And Madison says, "Yeah, I've been getting that a lot lately." So a lot of this dialogue, not only can it apply to Beth, but that's what it reminds me of. Like, this kind of thing is probably going to be said between Beth and the group when she finally returns. Now, Daniel is also super excited to see Luciana because those two were always really close. They had kind of a father-daughter relationship. And he has some interesting dialogue, too, that I think could apply to Beth and Daryl. He says, "Is that you? I've been looking for you for years." And she says, "You found me." Again, that just sounds like something that Beth and Daryl could say to one another. But the "you found me" also kind of reminded me of Rick in 904, which was his last episode on the flagship show. He talks about looking for his family and how it's been a great big search for his family. And then right at the end, right before he shoots the dynamite, which blows up the bridge, he says, "I found them." So it's also kind of a callback to that. And it just goes to show that one of the main themes of the entire Walking Dead universe is being separated from family, from people you love, and the journey to find them again. And I think obviously that applies to Beth and Daryl's arc, but that's why it's so potent. I mean, it doesn't just apply to them, it applies to a lot of arcs. And we've seen a lot of characters who have found family members, and then that's the end of their arc, and they die afterward. And so you can kind of see that it's an arc that goes through the entire show. And I'm not saying at all that Beth and Daryl are going to find each other and then die. Like, that's not what I mean. But it's just important to realize how prevalent that is. And they are still doing it with pretty much all the spin-offs that are going on right now. Daryl's trying to find his way home to his family. We, believe he will run into Beth, and that's going to be important. Just the fact that Carol is looking for him. To her, he is her family, so she's searching for him. We've got Michonne looking for Rick. We had Maggie looking for her son who was taken from her. I mean, it's just still a very, very prevalent theme in the show. All right, so then we have Madison talking to Strand about Alicia, and she says, "My baby's been alive all this time." And he says, "We all thought she was gone." So there's that gone imagery. Once again, I'm telling you, Alicia is not dead. She's around somewhere. She's just gone. She's not actually deceased. And then she says, "Yeah, but I'm her mother. I shouldn't have given up on her. I should have known." Again, I just think that's all stuff that once we get the missing 17 days, it's going to make more sense. But I think that's stuff that Daryl could say about Beth. I should have known she was alive. I shouldn't have given up on her. I should have kept looking, all of that. And then Madison says something else that's interesting. She says, "I need to put her to rest. I need to bury her, all of her." And then Strand says, "If she's out there, we'll find her." So, yeah, all of this is just really, really interesting dialogue. We have the importance of burying somebody. And, if you haven't watched it, go watch my video about the missing 17 days and about how they probably tried to bury Beth at a white church, but were not able to. And that's super important. That's one of the reasons Daryl has not been able to move on. Not really, because there was no closure there at all. All right, so then we get a little bit more into the plot of the episode. We find that Luciana, they call her Lucy, has been refining gas for Padre, which is a negative organization. Again, if you haven't watched the first half of the season, they actually were bad guys, basically. They were stealing children and basically trying to raise them on their own and kind of repopulate the world, but in a really negative dynamic. And now they've kind of been taken down, and Madison's group has taken over and is trying to make it into a more positive place. Anyway, Lucy has been working for these bad guys, refining gasoline for them, but she's also been stealing their supplies and leaving them on the road to help others. So she always just says that it was a trade-off. She was willing to help them as long as she could do something to give back to others as well. And we also find out partway through the episode that she bartered for Daniel's life. She said that she would help them if they would leave Daniel alive. And he has not known that these 7 years, but it's really interesting, actually. I'll come back to that in just a minute. So she's been working for them. She's the one that set up this gas station, and that's why the box that was so similar to what they did before, because she's the one who kind of resurrected it and started doing that again. Then Lucy is acting really weird and wants them to stay inside because somebody else has arrived. And, they're wondering if maybe she's working for Troy or something. And as it turns out, she isn't. But they say that somebody called the Iron Tiger is here. It turns out to be a call sign for a trucker. And when the truck gets there, we don't know who's in the truck, and they do the thing where they don't show you the face right away. So it turns out to be Charlie. And sorry, I keep saying this, but once again, if you haven't watched the show, she's someone who's been on the show for a long time. And she got radiation poisoning, which they do mention in the episode. And the last we saw her, she seemed to be dying from radiation poisoning, but we didn't actually see her die. Clearly, she's alive and well and was able to be treated for it. So let's, I got to unpack. There's a lot of stuff to unpack here, okay? So with Charlie, as with Alicia, as with Beth, let's remember that if we don't actually see, and at this point with Troy, it's not even a dead body that's good enough. Like, you almost have to see that they've been decapitated or that they've turned into Walker and they absolutely cannot come back, okay? Because when Charlie left, it was understood that she was going to die because she had this radiation poisoning that was killing her and they had no way to treat her. But here they say that Padre had the ability to treat her, so they were able to, and she survived. So again, unless you've seen that body or them turn into a Walker, you cannot assume anything. The next thing is that, so I looked into, we've seen the trucker symbol a few times, mostly on Fear rather than in the flagship show, although there was that story from Ghosts where Carol dreamed that Daryl said his father was a trucker, and then it turned out that was a dream and he said my father was not a trucker. So they've used it a little bit, and it's kind of an interesting symbol, but we've seen it a lot more on Fear because one of the characters, Sarah, actually is a trucker and used to drive a truck around. Anyway, I looked into Iron Tiger. At first, a lot of things came up with that name. There's an online tattoo place. There's books by that name. But when I looked up the meaning of Iron Tiger, then some things got kind of interesting. Iron Tiger, there's something called tiger iron. So it's kind of the opposite, right? But it's a rock that's made up of tiger's eye quartz, black hematite, and red jasper. Remember the green jasper from season 4? So the reason that this is interesting to me is that, well, first of all, the tiger's eye quartz could possibly, it's all about vision and seeing the world better, having a clearer vision of things. So it actually could be tied to the Sirius symbolism a little bit. But you have green jasper in season 4. Now you have kind of a oblique reference to red jasper. And that kind of goes into the red and green color scheme that we see a lot. And it's always been my belief that the red and green color scheme, other people think it means other things, but I think that it means death and resurrection. So ultimately, I think it means like a resurrection cycle, but of course you can't be resurrected unless you die first. So if you were to, divide it out, the red would probably mean death and the green would mean resurrection, right? But one leads to another. So that's kind of interesting in this episode that they have specifically a reference to red jasper given what happens. So I will come back to that. So everyone mostly is really excited to see Charlie because they haven't seen her in a while, and most of them assume she was dead. The other thing about this that's really interesting is they give her red bandanas hanging from her pants, and that has always classically been a Daryl thing. At first, especially because it showed her climbing down, we hadn't seen her face, it was kind of showing her from behind, and I saw that, I went, wait a minute, this isn't actually going to be Daryl, is it? I had half a second where I considered that it might be, and of course it wasn't, it was Charlie, but I'm not entirely sure why they're giving her his red bandanas. I might have some guesses. We haven't seen the red bandana from him in a while, at least we didn't see it much in the Daryl Dixon spinoff. Of course, that's because he's not wearing his normal clothing. But we also saw the red garment in Beth's cell. And if that goes along with the red symbolism, the red-green stuff, I always thought that represented that part of her arc in season 4 and 5 was going to lead to her apparent death, right? That was the death part of the arc. But the green represents the resurrection part of the arc. So the same thing could be true here with Charlie. And that actually goes along with the red jasper and everything. But I don't know. The only thing that I can think of is that we've always said that in a lot of ways, Daryl died too after Coda. It was just more of a spiritual or emotional death for him than, than obviously than a physical one. So anyway, it's just interesting that they gave this to Charlie. And I don't know, I'll have to think about it more and talk to my fellow theorists about it. So she finally gets down from the truck and they're all kind of having a reunion. And Daniel especially was very close to her. Daniel lost his daughter, his biological daughter, pretty early on in the series, and his wife. So he kind of has been a father figure to a lot of these characters, including Luciana, and Charlie was another one he was very close to. So he hugs her and he says, "You're still here," which is another line we heard around Beth, specifically at Grady. She said that to Carol when she held her hand and said, "I just want you to know I'm here." And it's just, it's a line we heard a lot in season 5. So Charlie then tells Madison that she killed Nick. And this is, again, it's part of the plot. Charlie was just a kid when she came in to be part of the group, and she did end up shooting Nick, which was Madison's son, and he died. And that was because the actor wanted to leave the show. But that's something that Madison didn't know, and that's obviously, as the showrunner said during the episode Insider, it's quite the gut punch for Madison because she's the one who brought Charlie into the group, and then because she did that, basically her son got killed. So this is something she's going to blame herself for and be very angry about and basically try to kill Charlie, which she does in the episode. But ultimately, she wants Charlie to kill Troy as a way of atoning for what happened with Nick, and Charlie agrees. So that means she's going to try and infiltrate Troy's, group, his organization, and see if she can kill him and see if she can find out anything more about Alicia, because he keeps telling Madison that he killed Alicia. Then we have this moment where Lucy and Daniel talk, and this is where she said that she wanted to look for him, but she couldn't. She needed to protect him. She needed to protect her operation. I thought before about this maybe being something Beth will do. It's going to depend on whether she, we don't know how she's going to show up. Is she going to have her memory? Is she going to know where the group is or not? But I can see it being something where maybe she does know something about them or where they are, but she wants to protect them, especially if she's protecting them from the CRM. And so she doesn't approach them right away or something like that. I don't know. That just jumped out at me because it's something that we've considered before. And then they were very obvious about it here, that this is why Lucy had not approached Daniel, is because she was trying to protect him from Padre, and she was also trying to protect the people in her operation. We also find out that they have Nick's ashes in a coffee can. This is more of the plot, and the biggest thing to me that jumped out here is that it's a coffee can. So we've seen the coffee symbol a lot, and I think I've talked about it on a couple of my videos. We see it kind of mostly around Carol more than anything else, and it goes back to that little analogy that Paula, which was one of the saviors who took Carol and Maggie in 613, she talked about the 3 things that go into the water. The carrot went in, I'm going to mess this up, but the carrot went in firm and came out soggy. The egg went in brittle and came out hard, but the coffee beans changed the nature of the water itself. So, I think what they're trying to say in this case is that Nick's death was a big deal and changed everything. The fact that Charlie did that changed everything, and it's still changing things moving forward. But that is a big symbol that we've seen, and it's really, really interesting to see it here, especially given what happens. So when she finds the coffee can and is told what happened, and that it was Charlie who wanted to bring Nick's ashes and give him a more meaningful burial, that changes Madison's mind about Charlie, and she calls her on the radio and asks her to come back. But unfortunately, it's a little too late. Troy has already gotten a hold of her. So then we kind of see Charlie in Troy's camp, and he's cutting arms off walkers. And he's clearly doing this because he wants Madison to think that every single walker that has their arm cut off is Alicia, which sort of gives credence to the idea that he probably did not kill Alicia. She's probably around somewhere. So let's talk about the arm symbol for just a minute. I know that in the comics, which I have not read, Rick loses an arm, and we have seen some allusion to that back. It was actually in season 5 in Them. There was always this scene that always stood out to me where they're fighting walkers on the bridge, and one of the walkers almost bites Rick's arm. And it felt like a little bit of a, Daryl gets there in time and stops it from happening. Obviously, Rick didn't lose his arm in season 5. But it also felt like a bit of a nod to the comics to me, but I also wondered if it was a foreshadow. And there was a lot of conjecture that when Rick went into the river in 905, he might have been bitten. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but in the previews for, whenever we've seen him, it doesn't look like he's lost an arm, so maybe not. But it's still kind of an interesting symbol, and here, I think it's pretty safe to say that the arm symbolism is definitely a symbol of a bite, because that's what happened to Alicia. She got bit on the arm and cut off her arm. And in that particular scene from them, which is 510, Rick almost got bitten on the arm, and if he had, they would have had to cut off his arm. So I do feel like this is the symbol of a bite, and they're really emphasizing it here. Something that me and my fellow theorists have always said is that Fear, that spinoff, Fear the Walking Dead, it's much more obvious what the symbolism is there than the flagship show was. So we kind of use it as almost a reference to be able to interpret the symbolism, and then it makes it a little bit easier in other parts of the universe to also interpret that symbolism. So Troy is cutting the arms off walkers. He wants Charlie to tell him where Padre is, but she won't. Then her tanker truck blows up, and he thinks it was on a timer and Charlie planned it, and it does look like that is the case, because it was either going to be that she planned it or that, Madison and her group were there, because they did plan to go rescue Charlie. But then we see them on the road, and they're as shocked by the explosion as anyone else, so they didn't plan it, Charlie did. So they talk to Troy on the radio and decide to meet him in front of his motel, and Madison says she'll give him the location of Padre. So then we have a bit of a showdown between Madison and Troy, and he keeps talking about the things she took from him, and so she's clearly confused about what he means when he says that. I mean, yeah, she tried to kill him, but he keeps saying she took everything from him, and she's going, okay, what is everything? What did I take from you? She asked if it was his dad, because on the first, the season that he was in, most of his family gets killed as well, and he said he didn't care about his old man, he wasn't close to him, and so clearly there's something else going on here that he hasn't told her. Anyway, so it looks like Madison is going to give him the location of Padre, and she just says, well, you know what, we're going to have to figure it out. But it's because she doesn't want Charlie to die after everything that's happened. So then Charlie, because she doesn't want them to give Troy the location of Padre, she keeps saying that it's not even for Madison that she's doing this, it's for Alicia. Alicia wanted to build this place, and Alicia was one of her first friends, and Alicia forgave her, Charlie, for killing her brother. So she doesn't want that to happen. And she says, Troy can't demand that they give him the location of Padre if he doesn't have leverage. And then Charlie, unfortunately, commits suicide. So this was a very sad moment, but I also want you to think about the parallels here to Grady. Okay, we have somebody who was a prisoner. They end up getting shot in the head. In this case, it was by her own hand. In Beth's, it was not. But still, there's a similarity there. There was a prisoner exchange of sorts. And then Charlie actually sacrificed herself for other people. Now, we don't know in what capacity that was true of Beth, because we're still really confused about what went down there. But as we've talked about before, Father Gabriel and others have talked about Beth being a sacrifice, and we had that cross that was on her wrist when she was in the hallway at Grady. So she was clearly symbolically meant to be a sacrifice. And I do believe that when we find out everything that was going on there, I think what was going on was really, really complex. And even the stuff that we've discovered and put together about the missing 17 days probably doesn't cover it all. I think there was something going on in which Beth, having been shot, actually allowed Team Family to leave, and if that hadn't happened, none of them would have been able to get out of Atlanta, or maybe even out of the hospital, at all. And so they don't understand the extent to which that actually saved them, but I believe it did, and we just don't understand quite how yet. So I believe that this was meant to be a replay of Grady, okay? I mean, the details were a little bit different. Charlie took her own life. She put the gun under her chin, which was, obviously different than Beth's injury, and Charlie's was probably not survivable, depending on what the bullet went through. If she severed her spinal cord, she would not have turned into a walker. It was a completely different kind of gunshot injury. But we have a lot of similarities in the structure of what was going on. She was a prisoner to a bad person. There's a prisoner exchange. She was shot. She sacrificed herself to save everyone else. It goes on and on. So that's really interesting, and it kind of makes some of the symbolism we saw with them talk about resurrection and, the eagle and the pig and all of that make a little bit more sense. But once again, you would think because Daniel talked about resurrection that you would have seen somebody resurrect here, and the point is, I don't think Charlie is alive and coming back. I think they really did kill her off in the series. I guess she resurrected in the sense that right after that they saw her for the first time and they thought that she had been dead. But anyway, it's really interesting the way that they're using all of this symbolism together. So then it looks like everyone's going to go their separate ways. Troy still wants the location of Padre, but Madison has no reason to give it to him now because Charlie is dead and he doesn't have any leverage. And then somebody from Troy's group walks up and tells him that someone named Tracy, has gone missing. And we don't know who Tracy is, but the person who says she's gone missing is a kid and says that she wanted to go see the tanker because she's never seen a burning truck before. And Troy basically freaks out and goes screaming after this person toward the tanker looking for her. So it was pretty obvious that maybe this is his kid or somebody he cares about. And this is where some of what he's angry with Madison about finally comes out. She chases him and she's asking him who this is, and she figures out that this is his kid, his daughter probably. And then he tells her, he says once again that she took people from him, and she says, I didn't take anyone from you. And he says that Tracy's mother is dead because of her. So we don't know exactly what that means, but I'm assuming that something about when Madison used to be a snatcher for Padre and tried to take a kid or something, somehow that led to this woman's death, and that's why Troy is upset, and that's why he wants Padre, because he genuinely wants a safe place to raise his daughter, even though he's clearly going about it in a villainous sort of way. Madison also realizes that he's been cutting the arms off walkers, which might mean that he's lying about Alicia. Just a lot of interesting things happen in this episode, even plot-wise. I thought it was a really fun episode to watch. At the end of it, we basically see everybody split up. Everybody's kind of angry at each other. Everyone's kind of angry at Madison because she forced Charlie to go into that. And then she did change her mind and try to save her, but it was too late at that point, and Charlie died. So Lucy and Daniel are definitely very angry at Madison, and they leave and go their separate ways from her. But then she refuses to go back to Padre. She tells Strand that he's going to have to build it on his own, and she takes off on her own. And that's basically where we leave the episode. So the only other thing I really have to add is that in the episode Insider, which they never show those on TV, so if you don't know what that is, on the app, they always have this little extra minute or two when the showrunners talk about the episode, right? So during the flagship show, it was always Angela Kang talking about the episode, and they never talk about symbolism or anything. They talk more about sometimes filming stuff, but sometimes the story and what they want us to glean from it. And here, just both the showrunners talked about Charlie as a sacrifice. They actually used that verbiage. They said Charlie sacrificed herself to the group, and after Charlie's sacrifice, everyone splits up and goes their separate ways. You know what I mean? So I thought it was interesting that they specifically used that word. And once again, we heard it used in season 5 when Father Gabriel was yelling at Sasha. So really interesting stuff in this episode. And I feel like it was meant to be a replay of Grady. It was meant to show us something very similar to that. And this is right after season 1 of the Daryl Dixon spinoff. And it's going to, coming up, we're going to see more of Rick and Michonne, and of course season 2 of the Daryl Dixon spinoff. So it's interesting that they're doing this now in this episode. But like I said, I really did enjoy the episode, and it looks like from the preview that the next episode will be about Dwight and Sherry, so I'm kind of excited for that. I do have a lot of asks still in my inbox, so I'll be doing more ask videos, but I'll probably be changing what they're called since they're not necessarily all related to Daryl Dixon season 1 anymore, but I will be putting up more videos this week, so stay tuned for that. I hope y'all liked the episode, and tell me what you thought. Bye.